pain shooting through Clara Bennett's wrist had become a constant companion over the past 3 days, but the floors of the Golden Spur Saloon would not scrub themselves, and rent was due by week's end. It was May of 1877 in Dodge City, Kansas, and survival meant swallowing down suffering and pushing forward, even when every fiber of her body screamed for rest. She had fallen down the narrow stairs leading to her rented room above the dress shop 2 nights before, catching herself awkwardly on the wooden steps, and the sickening crack that followed told her something had broken. But doctors cost money, and money was something she did not have, not after her father had drunk himself to death 6 months prior, leaving her nothing but debts and the clothes on her back. The scrub brush felt like it weighed 50 pounds in her swollen hand. As she dragged it across the sticky floorboards, her teeth gritted against the agony that radiated up her arm with each movement. The saloon was empty in the early morning light just past dawn, and she had perhaps 2 hours to finish before the first customers would wander in looking for hair of the dog. Her dark hair hung loose around her face, damp with sweat despite the coolness of the morning, and her simple brown dress was soaked at the knees from kneeling in the sudsy water. She did not hear the footsteps behind her, too focused on forcing her injured wrist to cooperate, to keep moving, to finish just this one section before she allowed herself a moment to breathe through the pain. When the scrub brush was suddenly lifted from her hand, she gasped and looked up, startled, to find a tall cowboy standing over her, his expression a mixture of concern and something close to anger. "What in the hell do you think you are doing?" His voice was deep and rough, like gravel underfoot, but there was no real harshness in it, only disbelief. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of whiskey in lamplight. His dark hair needed cutting, and several days of stubble shadowed his jaw. He wore dusty trail clothes, the kind that spoke of long days in the saddle, and a gun belt sat low on his hips. Clara tried to grab the brush back, but the movement sent such a sharp bolt of pain through her wrist that she cried out involuntarily, cradling her arm against her chest. "Give that back. I have work to finish." The cowboy's eyes dropped to her wrist, and his jaw tightened visibly. He crouched down beside her, setting the brush aside, and reached for her arm with surprising gentleness. "Let me see." "I am fine," she insisted, trying to pull away, but he was already carefully examining her wrist, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender as they probed the swollen flesh. "You're not fine. This is broken." His eyes met hers, and there was something in that gaze that made her throat tighten. Not pity exactly, but a kind of understanding that spoke of his own familiarity with pain and hardship. "How long have you been working on it like this?" 3 days, she admitted quietly, defeated. "I fell down the stairs." He cursed under his breath, soft but emphatic. "And you have been scrubbing floors?" He shook his head, standing up and offering her his other hand. "Come on, get up off this floor." "I cannot. I have to finish." "You are not scrubbing another damn inch of this floor." His tone left no room for argument. "Can you stand?" She wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her independence and her pride, but the relief of having someone else take charge, even for a moment, was overwhelming. She let him help her to her feet, swaying slightly as the world tilted from the combination of pain and exhaustion. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, his touch careful, and guided her to one of the tables. "Sit," he ordered, pulling out a chair. "Do not move." Clara sank into the chair gratefully, cradling her injured wrist. She watched as he disappeared through the back door of the saloon, returning a few minutes later with his saddlebags. He set them on the table and began pulling out supplies: clean cloth strips, 2 straight pieces of wood that looked like they had been whittled smooth, and a small flask of what she assumed was whiskey. "What is your name?" he asked as he worked, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Clara Bennett." She hesitated, then added, "And yours?" "James Cartwright. Most people call me Carter." He glanced up at her, and something flickered in his eyes, something warm that made her breath catch. "This is going to hurt. I am sorry for that." It already hurts, she said, attempting a weak smile. He returned the expression with a slight quirk of his lips before his face grew serious again. I need to feel if the bones are aligned properly before I splint it. If they are not, I will have to set them, and that will hurt worse. Clara nodded, bracing herself. When his fingers pressed gently along her wrist, testing, she bit down hard on her lower lip to keep from crying out. His touch was as careful as possible, but there was no way to avoid the pain entirely. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute, he sat back slightly. It could be worse. Feels like a clean break, and the bones have not shifted too badly. You are lucky you did not do more damage scrubbing with it. There was a note of reproach in his voice, but it was softened by concern. I am going to splint it now. It will ache, but it should feel better once it is immobilized. He worked with the confidence of someone who had done this before, perhaps many times. Clara found herself wondering about his story, about what kind of life left a man skilled in setting broken bones. He positioned the wooden slats on either side of her wrist and forearm, then began wrapping the cloth strips around them, firm but not too tight, securing everything in place. His hands were steady and sure, and she found herself watching his face as he concentrated on his task. There was something compelling about him, something that went beyond his rugged good looks. Perhaps it was the gentleness in his rough hands, or the way he had not hesitated to help a stranger, expecting nothing in return. Where did you learn to do this? She asked softly, needing to fill the silence. Trail work, cattle drives, you spend enough time out on the range, you learn to patch up both men and animals. He tied off the last strip of cloth and sat back to examine his work. That should hold. You need to keep it still for at least 6 weeks, longer if you can. No scrubbing floors, no heavy lifting, nothing that puts strain on it. Clara felt panic rise in her chest. 6 weeks? I cannot afford not to work for 6 weeks. I will lose my room. I will starve. Hey. His hand covered hers, the uninjured one, and his eyes held hers with an intensity that silenced her rising hysteria. We will figure something out. You are not going to starve, and you are not going to lose your room. I promise you that. You do not even know me. Why would you make such a promise? Something in his expression shifted, grew more vulnerable. Because when I walked in here and saw you hurting yourself trying to survive, it felt like someone had punched me in the chest. And I do not know why, but I know I cannot just walk away and leave you to suffer. He pulled his hand back, looking almost embarrassed by his own honesty. Maybe that makes me a fool. It makes you kind, Clara said quietly, feeling warmth spread through her chest despite the throbbing pain in her wrist. That's a rare thing. Carter cleared his throat and stood up, breaking the moment. I'm going to talk to the saloon owner. See if I can work out something for your wages while you recover. Mr. Dalton is not known for his charity, Clara warned, but Carter was already striding toward the back rooms where the owner kept his office. She sat at the table, her newly splinted wrist resting in her lap, and listened to the raised voices that came from the office. She could not make out the words, but Carter's deep voice was firm and unyielding, while Mr. Dalton's higher-pitched tones grew increasingly defensive. After several minutes, Carter emerged, his jaw set but his eyes holding a glint of satisfaction. You are paid up through the end of the month, he announced, and Dalton is hiring someone else to do the heavy work while you heal. He said you can help with the lighter tasks once you're feeling up to it, folding laundry, things like that. Clara stared at him in disbelief. How did you manage that? I can be persuasive when I need to be. He paused, then added with a slight grin, and I may have mentioned that I know several fellows who frequent this establishment and would be disappointed to learn that their favorite saloon owner was mistreating an injured woman. Despite everything, Clara found herself smiling. Thank you. Truly. I do not know how I can ever repay you. You can start by getting some rest and letting that wrist heal. He hesitated, then pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Where do you live? I will walk you home. I rent a room above the dress shop just down the street. She stood carefully, and he rose with her, offering his arm for support. "You do not have to trouble yourself further. You have done so much already." "It is no trouble." His voice was soft, almost tender, and when she looked up at him, she saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "Besides, I want to make sure you get there safely." They walked slowly through the dusty streets of Dodge City as the town began to wake up around them. The morning sun was climbing higher, painting the wooden buildings in shades of gold and amber. Carter matched his pace to hers, patient and attentive, his hand hovering near her elbow as if ready to catch her should she stumble. "How long have you been in Dodge City?" Clara asked, curious about this man who had appeared in her life like some kind of guardian angel. "I arrived last night late. I have been working a ranch up near Hayes for the past year, but I decided it was time to move on." He glanced at her. "I was planning to head further west, maybe try my luck in Colorado, but I think my plans just changed." Her heart fluttered at the implication. "Because of me?" "Because of you," he confirmed, his voice steady and certain. "I cannot leave knowing you are here alone, injured, struggling to get by. It would not sit right with me." They reached the dress shop, and Clara led him around to the side entrance that led to the upstairs rooms. The stairs were narrow and steep, and she eyed them with trepidation, remembering all too well her fall just days before. Carter seemed to read her thoughts. "Hold on to me," he said, offering his arm more firmly. "I will not let you fall." Together they climbed the stairs, Carter taking most of her weight and moving slowly, carefully. Her room was small and sparse, containing little more than a narrow bed, a washstand, and a battered trunk that held her few possessions. She felt a flash of embarrassment at its meagerness, but Carter did not seem to notice or care. He helped her to the bed and made sure she was settled comfortably before stepping back. "You need to rest," he said firmly. "When did you last sleep properly?" Clara tried to remember and found she could not. "I do not know. A few days, I suppose." "Then sleep now. I will come back this evening to check on you and bring you some food." "You do not have to—" "Clara." He crouched down beside the bed so he was at eye level with her. "Let me help you, please. I know you are used to taking care of yourself, and I respect that. But right now you need help, and I want to give it. Can you let me do that?" There was something in his eyes, a vulnerability mixed with determination, that told her this was about more than just charity. This meant something to him, though she could not quite understand what or why. But she was so tired, so worn down by pain and fear and loneliness, that she found herself nodding. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you, Carter." His smile was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. "Get some sleep. I will be back." After he left, Clara lay back on her thin pillow and stared at the ceiling, her splinted wrist resting on her stomach. She should have felt afraid, allowing a strange man into her life so quickly, trusting him so easily. But instead, she felt something she had not experienced in months: hope. The pain in her wrist was already less intense now that it was properly supported, and exhaustion pulled at her like a heavy blanket. Within minutes, she was asleep. She woke to someone knocking softly on her door. Disoriented, she sat up and realized the light coming through her small window was the golden glow of evening. She had slept the entire day away. "Come in," she called, her voice rough from sleep. Carter entered carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle that smelled heavenly. "I brought dinner. Beef stew and fresh bread from the boarding house down the street." Clara's stomach growled audibly, and she felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Carter just laughed, a warm, genuine sound that filled the small room. He pulled the single chair closer to the bed and began unwrapping the food, revealing not just stew and bread, but also a small jar of honey and some sliced apples. "This is too much," Clara protested weakly, even as her mouth watered. "It is exactly enough." He handed her a bowl and spoon. "Eat." They ate together in comfortable silence, and Clara could not remember when food had tasted so good. It was not just the hunger, though she was ravenous. It was the companionship, the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with someone who seemed to genuinely care about her well-being. When they finished, Carter collected the dishes and set them aside, then pulled the chair even closer to the bed. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better. The sleep helped, and my wrist feels more stable now." She flexed her fingers experimentally, relieved that the sharp pain had dulled to a persistent ache. "What did you do today?" "I found work at the livery stable. Nothing fancy, but it is steady pay and a place to sleep. I will be mucking stalls and tending horses." He grinned. "Cannot say it is glamorous, but I have done worse." "You found work already? Just so you could stay in Dodge City?" His eyes met hers, serious and intent. "I told you. My plans changed." Clara felt her breath catch. "Carter, you cannot upend your whole life for someone you just met this morning." "Why not?" He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze never leaving hers. "Maybe I have been drifting for too long, looking for a reason to stop moving. Maybe you are that reason." "You do not know anything about me?" "Then tell me. I want to know everything." So she did. As the evening light faded and shadows filled the small room, Clara told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her mother who died giving birth to a baby brother who also did not survive, about her father who never recovered from the loss and slowly drowned himself in whiskey. She told him about coming west after he died, hoping for a fresh start, only to find that survival here was just as hard as it had been back east. She told him about the loneliness, the fear, the constant struggle to keep her head above water. Carter listened to every word, his expression grave and attentive. When she finally finished, her voice hoarse from talking, he reached out and took her uninjured hand in his. "You're the strongest person I have ever met," he said quietly, "and you deserve so much better than scrubbing floors and living in fear." "What I deserve and what life gives me are two different things." "Maybe, but maybe that can change." He squeezed her hand gently. "I know it is too soon, and I know you have no reason to trust me beyond what I have shown you today, but I need you to know that I am here, and I am not going anywhere. Whatever you need, whatever you are facing, you do not have to face it alone anymore." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. "Why? Why do you care so much?" Carter was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "My mother died when I was 15. She broke her leg, and it got infected, and we could not afford a doctor. I watched her suffer and fade away, knowing that if we had just had the money, she might have lived." His voice was rough with old pain. "When I saw you this morning, hurting yourself because you could not afford to stop working, I saw her, and I could not walk away. I will not walk away." "Oh, Carter." Clara turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. "I am so sorry. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something. When you see someone who needs help, you help them. You do not hesitate. You do not make excuses. You just do what needs to be done." He looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw not just pain, but also determination and a fierce protectiveness that made her heart swell. And when you find someone who makes you feel like maybe the world is not such a hard, lonely place after all, you hold on to them. "Is that what I am?" she asked softly. "Someone worth holding on to?" "I think you might be everything," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The air between them seemed to crackle with possibility. Clara knew it was reckless, knew she should be more cautious, but something in her heart recognized something in his, and she could no more deny the connection between them than she could stop breathing. "Stay," she said impulsively. "Just for a little while longer. I do not want to be alone tonight." Carter nodded, settling back in the chair and keeping her hand clasped in his. "I will stay as long as you want me to." They talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Clara learned that Carter had been working cattle drives and ranch jobs since he was 16, sending money home to help his father and younger siblings until his father remarried and the new family was stable. She learned that he loved the freedom of the open range but sometimes ached for a place to call home. She learned that he had a scar on his shoulder from a stampede in Texas and that he could play the harmonica but was terrible at cards. Carter learned that Clara secretly loved to read but had no books of her own, that she had always dreamed of having a house with a real garden, and that she missed the green hills of Ohio even though returning there would feel like failure. He learned that she hummed while she worked, and that she was afraid of thunderstorms. He learned that she had not let herself cry over her father's death because she was afraid that if she started, she would never stop. As the night wore on and Clara's eyelids grew heavy, Carter finally stood to leave. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "Sleep well," he murmured. "I will see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed, already drifting back toward sleep. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Carter would come by in the mornings before his shift at the livery, bringing her breakfast and making sure she had everything she needed. In the evenings, he would return with dinner, and they would spend hours talking, slowly peeling back the layers of their respective lives and histories. On his day off, he took her for careful walks around town, his arm supporting her, introducing her to people he had met and making sure everyone knew she was under his protection. Clara found herself healing in more ways than one. Her wrist was slowly mending under the careful splint, but more than that, the constant fear and loneliness that had been her companions for so long began to fade. With Carter by her side, the world seemed less harsh, less overwhelming. She caught herself smiling more, laughing at his jokes and stories, looking forward to each day instead of simply enduring it. For his part, Carter seemed to bloom in her presence. The guarded, solitary cowboy who had first taken the scrub brush from her hands gradually revealed a man of depth and tenderness, someone who had been carrying his own loneliness like a heavy pack and was relieved to finally set it down. He was attentive without being overbearing, protective without being controlling, and increasingly open with his affection. 6 weeks after that first morning, the doctor, who Carter insisted on paying for, declared her wrist healed enough to remove the splint. It was a warm July afternoon, and Carter had arranged to take the entire day off to be with her. After the doctor carefully unwrapped the cloth strips and examined her wrist, declaring it mended though still needing care, they walked to the edge of town where the grasslands stretched out endlessly toward the horizon. "How does it feel?" Carter asked, watching as Clara carefully flexed her wrist, testing its strength. "Strange. Weak. But whole again?" She smiled up at him. "Thanks to you. You did the hard part. You let it heal." He took her hand, the one that had been injured, and raised it to his lips, kissing her knuckles softly. "Clara, these past weeks with you have been the best of my life." Her heart began to race. "They have been wonderful for me, too." "I know it has only been 6 weeks. I know some people would say it is too soon, that we should wait, be sensible." He pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "But I've never been one for being sensible, and every instinct I have is telling me that I have found something rare and precious, and I would be a fool to let it slip away." "What are you saying?" Clara whispered, though she thought she knew, hoped she knew. "I am saying I love you. I am saying that I want to build a life with you, a real home, not just a rented room or a bunk in a livery stable. I am saying that I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I am saying that if you will have me, I want to marry you." Tears streamed freely down Clara's face now, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming happiness. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." "I love you too, Carter. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you took that brush from my hands and decided I mattered." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Clara felt like she was finally home after years of wandering. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Carter rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have much," he admitted, "but I have been saving my wages, and I have enough to rent us a small house, maybe with a little bit of land, not much, but enough to start." That sounds perfect. Clara laughed, dizzy with happiness. I do not need much. I just need you. They were married a week later by the circuit preacher who came through Dodge City. It was a simple ceremony with just a few witnesses, including the livery owner who had grown fond of Carter and the wife of the boarding house owner who had befriended Clara. Clara wore a simple blue dress that Carter had purchased for her, the nicest thing she had owned in years, and Carter wore his cleanest shirt and had actually trimmed his beard for the occasion. The small house Carter had found was on the outskirts of town, a modest wooden structure with 2 rooms and a bit of land behind it. It was not much, but to Clara it was a palace. For the first time in her adult life, she had a home, a real home, and someone to share it with. Their first months of marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. Carter continued working at the livery while also taking on odd jobs around town, building his reputation as a hard worker and honest man. Clara, once her wrist was fully strong again, took in sewing and mending work, discovering she had a talent for it. She set up a small workspace in their front room, and slowly, word spread that she did good work at fair prices. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, the small intimacies of shared life. Clara learned that Carter liked his coffee strong and black, that he was grumpy in the mornings until he had fully woken up, and that he had nightmares sometimes about his mother's death that left him shaking and reaching for her in the darkness. Carter learned that Clara sang softly to herself when she was content, that she had a sweet tooth and would do just about anything for a piece of chocolate, and that she still sometimes woke up in a panic, convinced she had overslept and would lose her job, until she remembered that she was safe now, that everything had changed. But through it all, what grew between them was a love that deepened with each passing day. They were tender with each other, patient, learning to anticipate each other's needs and wants. Carter would surprise her with small gifts, a book he found at the general store, a ribbon for her hair, wildflowers picked on his way home from work. Clara would make his favorite meals, mend his clothes with special care, and wait up for him no matter how late he worked, wanting to hear about his day. The physical intimacy between them grew naturally, an extension of the emotional connection they had built. Carter was always gentle, always attentive to her comfort and pleasure, and Clara found in his arms a sense of safety and passion she had never imagined possible. They loved each other with an intensity that sometimes surprised them both, making up for all the years of loneliness with the fervent joy of finally being known, being cherished. As autumn arrived and the Kansas heat began to ease, Carter came home one evening with news that changed everything. The owner of the livery stable was getting old and wanted to retire, and he had offered to sell the business to Carter at a price he could afford if he was willing to make payments over time. "It is a risk," Carter admitted, as they sat together at their small kitchen table discussing the opportunity. "We would be taking on debt, and there is no guarantee we could make it work. But it is also a chance to build something real, something that could sustain us for years to come." Clara took his hand across the table. "I believe in you. If you think we can do this, then I think we should try." So Carter became a business owner, and their lives shifted once again. The work was hard and the hours long, but there was a satisfaction in building something together. Clara helped with the business side, keeping the books and managing the accounts with a precision that surprised them both. She discovered she had a head for numbers and a talent for negotiating fair deals with customers. Together, they made the livery stable not just survive, but thrive. Their first Christmas as a married couple was simple, but perfect. They could not afford much in the way of gifts, but they spent the day together cooking a small feast and enjoying the rare luxury of a day with no work. As snow fell gently outside their window, they sat together by the fire. Clara tucked against Carter's side, his arm around her shoulders. "I have been thinking," Carter said softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm, "about what comes next." "What do you mean?" "A family. Children." He looked down at her, his expression both hopeful and uncertain. "I know we have not talked about it much, but I want that with you. I want to fill this house with life and noise and love." Clara's heart swelled. "I want that too. Very much." Not right away necessarily. We should get the business more stable first, make sure we can afford it. But someday soon? Someday soon, she agreed, tilting her face up for a kiss. That someday came sooner than they expected. By February, Clara was fairly certain she was pregnant, and by March, the doctor confirmed it. Carter was over the moon, alternating between fierce protectiveness and giddy excitement. He fussed over Clara constantly, insisting she not overwork herself, making sure she was eating enough and resting enough and staying warm enough. "I am not made of glass," Clara protested one evening in April as Carter tried to insist she put her feet up instead of helping with the dinner dishes. "I am pregnant, not dying." I know, I just want to make sure you are all right, both of you." His hand went to her still flat stomach, his expression softening. "I cannot believe we are going to be parents." "Neither can I sometimes. It still feels like a dream." She covered his hand with hers. "A wonderful, terrifying dream." "We are going to be good at this," Carter said firmly. "We are going to give this baby everything we did not have. Love, stability, a real home." "We will," Clara agreed. "It's together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as summer arrived and Clara's belly grew round, the business continued to flourish. They were able to hire a young man to help with the heavier work at the livery, giving Carter more time to spend at home with Clara. They used some of their savings to add a third room to their house, a nursery for the baby, and spent happy evenings painting it and building simple furniture. In October of 1878, on a crisp autumn morning, Clara went into labor. Carter stayed by her side through the long hours, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. When the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced baby boy in Clara's arms, they both wept with joy and relief. "He is perfect," Clara whispered, gazing down at their son with wonder. "He is," Carter agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son's tiny face, Clara knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas, after your father." Carter looked at her in surprise. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. He was a good man who raised a good son. That is a legacy worth honoring." So Thomas James Cartwright entered the world, and with him came a new chapter in their lives. Parenthood was exhausting and overwhelming, and more wonderful than either of them had imagined. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and alert, and watching Carter with their son made Clara fall in love with her husband all over again. He was a natural father, patient and gentle, singing lullabies in his rough voice and walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy. The years that followed were full and rich. The livery stable continued to prosper, becoming one of the most respected businesses in Dodge City. They paid off the debt early and were able to save money, building a cushion of security that Clara had never dreamed possible. Thomas grew from a baby into a curious, energetic toddler, then into a bright, cheerful little boy. When Thomas was 3, Clara became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder, and she was sick for months. Carter hired additional help for both the business and the house, refusing to let Clara push herself the way she had before. Their daughter, Sarah, was born in the spring of 1882, a tiny, delicate baby with Clara's dark hair and Carter's whiskey-colored eyes. With 2 children and a thriving business, their house became too small, and they made the decision to build a new, larger home on a piece of land just outside town. It was a significant investment, but they could afford it now. And the new house had everything Clara had dreamed of: a real kitchen, a separate bedroom for each child, and best of all, a large plot of land where she could finally have the garden she had always wanted. Clara threw herself into creating that garden with the same determination she had once used just to survive. She grew vegetables and herbs, flowers and fruit trees. Thomas loved to help her, getting his hands dirty and learning the names of every plant. Sarah, when she was old enough to toddle around, would follow them through the rows, chattering nonsense and picking flowers to present to her father when he came home. On a warm evening in June of 1885, Carter came home to find his family in the garden. Thomas, now 7, was carefully watering the tomato plants while explaining to 5-year-old Sarah why they needed to be gentle with the stems. Clara was kneeling by the flower beds, her hands in the dirt, looking more content than he had ever seen her. He stood for a moment just watching them, his heart so full it ached. This life they had built together starting from that morning 8 years ago when he had taken a scrub brush from her broken hand was more than he had ever dared hope for. They had created not just a home, but a haven, a place of love and laughter and safety. Clara looked up and saw him, her face lighting up with a smile that still had the power to take his breath away. "You are home early." "I wanted to be with my family." He walked into the garden, Thomas and Sarah immediately running to greet him with shouts of "Papa." He scooped them both up, one in each arm, making them giggle. After setting them down and sending them back to their tasks, he went to Clara and helped her to her feet, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "How was your day?" she asked, brushing a smudge of dirt off his cheek. "Good, busy. I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "Do you remember that morning, the first time I saw you?" Clara smiled softly. "Of course. You took the scrub brush from my hand and splinted my wrist. You changed my entire life." "You changed mine too. I was so lost before I found you, just drifting from place to place, never belonging anywhere." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "I want you to know that every single day since then has been a gift. Marrying you, building this life with you, raising our children together. It is everything I never knew I needed." Tears sparkled in Clara's eyes. "I love you so much. Sometimes I still cannot believe how lucky I am that you walked into that saloon on that particular morning, that you cared enough to help, that you stayed. I will always stay. You are my home, Clara. You and Thomas and Sarah. This is where I belong." That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Carter and Clara sat together on the porch of their beautiful home, watching the stars come out over the Kansas prairie. Clara rested her head on Carter's shoulder, her once broken wrist, now completely healed, clasped in his calloused hand. "Tell me something," Clara said softly. "If you could go back and tell yourself that morning 8 years ago what your life would become, would you believe it?" Carter considered the question. "Probably not. I never imagined I could be this happy, this settled. But I'm glad I did not know. I'm glad I just followed my instincts and let it unfold naturally." "Me too. Though I think I fell in love with you the moment you took that brush away. I was too scared to admit it, even to myself. But I knew there was something special about you. I knew it too. The second I saw you, hurting but still trying so hard to survive, I just knew my life was about to change." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Best decision I ever made, staying in Dodge City." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the prairie sounds. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds. Around them, the garden Clara had nurtured bloomed in the darkness, filling the air with the scent of roses and jasmine. The livery stable in town would be there tomorrow, steady and reliable, providing for their family. And beside each other, hands clasped, Clara and Carter knew they had found what so many people spent their whole lives searching for: a love that was true and deep and lasting, a partnership built on mutual respect and tenderness, and a home that was more than just walls and a roof, but a sanctuary of safety and joy. As the night deepened and the air grew cool, they finally went inside, arms around each other, moving through their home with the easy familiarity of two people who had built a life together from nothing but determination and love. They checked on the children. Thomas sprawled across his bed with his arms flung wide, Sarah curled up with her favorite doll tucked under her chin. Then they retired to their own room, where they held each other close and talked in whispers about their plans for tomorrow and next week and next year. Years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved working with animals and eventually took over much of the daily management of the livery stable. Sarah, sweet and creative, discovered a talent for drawing and painting, filling their home with colorful artwork. Clara's sewing business had evolved into a small dress shop that she ran from their home, creating beautiful garments for the ladies of Dodge City and surrounding areas. Carter, now in his 40s, had become one of the most respected businessmen in the region, known for his fairness and integrity. But despite their success and the passing years, the core of their life remained the same. The deep, abiding love between Clara and Carter that had been forged in that saloon on a morning long ago. They still held hands when they walked together. They still shared their dreams and fears in quiet evening conversations. They still looked at each other sometimes with the same wonder and gratitude they had felt in those early days, grateful beyond measure for the chance meeting that had changed both their lives. In the spring of 1895, as they celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary, Carter took Clara back to that spot on the edge of town where he had first proposed to her. The town had grown around them over the years, but this place remained much the same. Grassland stretching endlessly toward the horizon, the big Kansas sky overhead. 18 years, Clara marveled, leaning against her husband's side. Sometimes it feels like 18 lifetimes, and sometimes it feels like just yesterday. I would live them all again, Carter said firmly, every single moment. The hard times and the good times, all of it, as long as they were with you. We have been blessed, have we not? 2 wonderful children, a good business, our health, and this love between us. She turned to face him, reaching up to touch his face, now weathered with age but still handsome to her eyes, still beloved. You saved me, you know. That morning when you took the scrub brush from my hand, you saved my life. And you saved mine. You gave me a reason to stop running, a reason to build something real. He captured her hand and kissed her palm. We saved each other, Clara. That is what love does. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, they stood together in that spot where so much had begun, holding each other close and watching the day fade into night. Behind them, in the town they had helped build, their children were growing into their own lives. Around them, the prairie stretched wild and beautiful, just as it had been on that day 18 years ago when a cowboy took a scrub brush from a suffering woman's hand and changed both their destinies. The years ahead would bring more changes and challenges, more joy and sorrow, as all lives do. Thomas would marry a sweet young woman named Emma and give them 3 grandchildren who called Clara and Carter Grandma and Grandpa and filled their later years with laughter and chaos. Sarah would eventually move to Denver to pursue her art, finding success and happiness there, but always coming home to visit, bringing her own family in time. The livery stable would eventually be sold to Thomas and Emma, allowing Carter and Clara to retire comfortably, spending their days working in their garden and spoiling their grandchildren. But through it all, the constant would be the love between Clara and Carter, the bond that had been forged in suffering and compassion, that had grown through challenge and triumph, and that would endure until their final days. They would grow old together, their hair turning silver, their bodies slowing, but their hearts remaining young in their love for each other. And when they told their grandchildren the story of how they met, speaking in turn and finishing each other's sentences the way long married couples do, the children would listen with wide eyes to the tale of the cowboy who took a scrub brush from a woman with a broken wrist and splinted it proper, not knowing that this single act of kindness would be the beginning of a love story that would span decades and generations. On a warm evening in their golden years, as they sat together on their porch with grandchildren playing in the garden Clara still tended with devoted care, Carter would take Clara's hand, the one that had been broken so long ago, and raise it to his lips just as he had done countless times over their many years together. "Does it ever hurt?" he would ask, as he had asked so many times before, and Clara would give the answer she always gave, smiling at him with eyes still full of love. "Not since the day you fixed it. You healed more than just my wrist that day, my love. You healed my heart and my spirit, too. You gave me a life worth living and a love worth cherishing. How could anything hurt when I have been so blessed? And in that moment, as the sun set over the Kansas prairie and their grandchildren's laughter filled the air, Clara and Carter would know with absolute certainty that every hardship they had endured, every struggle they had faced, had been worth it to bring them to this place, this life, this love that had sustained them through everything and would carry them forward until their final days together, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured from the smallest seed of kindness into a mighty tree that would shelter generations to come. Their story would be told and retold in their family for years after they were gone, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the truth that sometimes a single moment of choosing to help someone in need can change the course of two lives forever, creating ripples that spread outward through time, touching more hearts than anyone could possibly imagine on that fateful morning when a cowboy walked into a saloon and saw a woman scrubbing floors with a broken wrist and decided that he could not, would not, simply walk away.